Headlines.
Because we believe that stories can change the world.
Get ready because the show starts now.
One who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who is near, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
I am your host, Joy Thayer.
And I am Matt Thayer. And we're starting a new little series. We're going to try to do little tiny segments where we're going to break down a topic that I have been passionate about for a long time.
Very long time. What I love about being filmmakers is we get to delve into all different kinds of things, and especially things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
And so, they'd always say, if you're a scriptwriter, write what you know. And Matt knows a lot about the Bible.
Well, and so I've done a lot of research for some different projects, passion projects, things like that. But then also just
Not
because...
the passion.
Not the passion. No, sorry. Unfortunately, I wasn't a part of that gigantic project. Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the last days, or eschatology. It's a big word. The conversation around Revelation and all of that stuff. And I've read a bunch of books. And I've done a lot of research on it, and that's not to impress you as far as from the standpoint of that I would like for people to feel like they can challenge some of the things that I'm saying. I don't like it when people say oh, I've read all of this stuff, and so therefore, what I say that's dumb.
I'm pretty sure I challenge you on
you
almost
do
everything.
you challenge, yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really glad that you're here, because as we break down some of the stuff, we want to make sure that it's clear, that it's simple, that it's easy for people to go, oh, because I want it to be revelatory. Because that's one of the things about Book of Revelation, is that it's shrouded in confusion. It's just kind of this enigma at the end of the Bible for a lot of people. And it's called the Book of Revelation, not the Book of Confusion. So...
Yeah. This is, I think for me, it's been one of those topics that I agree I've been passionate about, but silent about. Because it was like sports. I never talked about sports. Didn't talk about politics. And when it came to religion, I really like sharing the good news, and I like sharing God's love. And so Revelation seemed to be something that was so confusing for people, and they would bring in all these other scriptures and all that kind of stuff, and then it would turn into an argument, and I was like, no. But the conversations that we've been having actually bring clarity and peace, and
actually brings Revelation into that good news.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is something that I'd love to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah. So before we get into that, real quick, just sponsor Mr. My Pillow, Mike Lindell.
Speaking
Thank you for
Christians.
being a part of our project. I've never seen him without his silver cross necklace.
Yeah.
And so he is a big supporter of our show and so many shows that a lot of you watch. So please support him. Support us. Use the promo code Spero, SPERO. And but anyway, so let's get into what it is that I wanted to break down today.
Okay.
So this, what I'm going to try to do is break down stuff in, like I said, chunks.
Okay.
So that it's kind of like an aha moment, and then the next one will unpack something else, and hopefully, you'll be able to listen to these things and share them, and cause conversation, because that's the whole point, right? So, all right. So the last days.
The last days.
The last days. Are we living in the last days?
Is that a trick question?
Well, no, I'm just saying that's what a lot of people are asking right now, because people will look at the newspaper and they'll say, it's looking so bad. It's got to be the last days, right? Because it's supposed to get really bad, and then Jesus is supposed to come back and fix everything.
Non-Christian friends that have heard about being left behind or the mark of the beast or anything, and they're going, we're definitely living in the biblical apocalyptic times.
The last days. Armageddon's around the corner, that kind of thing, right? So, okay. So those comments come from the Bible, come from a couple of places in the Bible. And a lot of people will say, well, Peter and Paul both said we're living in the last days.
Okay.
All right. And so one of the scriptures that's from is actually from Timothy, 2 Timothy 3:1, and it says, "But realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come, for men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips without self-control, brutal, haters of good." I mean, he just goes on. And people are like, well, he's describing our times.
Yeah.
Right? So
I mean, I would.
he must be talking about us.
Be like, how did he get to
Right.
2023?
And right, exactly. He had a time machine. But then also in 2 Peter, and I'm just going to go ahead and read this because I pulled this up on the Blue Letter Bible. It says, "Know this first of all, that in the last days mockers will come out with their mocking, following after their own lusts." So very similar kind of conversation here.
Also feels like the World Economic Forum.
Right, exactly,
like,
yeah.
So then, yeah, keep going.
So anyway, but the thing that we as filmmakers are always thinking about is who's our audience, right? Now,
It's true.
Now,
who's our target audience?
Right, who's the target audience? And the Bible, while it was penned by Paul and Peter, we hold to the fact that God was the inspiration. He was so it's inspired word of God. So God was communicating with humanity through this book and continuing to do so. But originally there was a target audience. And one of the things that you have to do in Bible study is you have to think about context, and you have to think about like what was the context not only of the verse within the chapter and the book, and what was the whole book saying, but who was the author and who was he writing to? Okay. So at the time that these things were written, Paul and Peter, it was about mid 60s.
So
in the first century.
Where do people get that information?
Well, most of the time in most Bibles, and this is actually the Founders Bible, which if you go to foundersbible.com, use promo code Sparrow, you'll get 20% off. But if you go to America, also made in America,
not made in China.
and it's wonderful. It's like a Bible and a history book all together. But right here, as 2 Timothy at the beginning of the book, it says date written around 67 AD. Okay. So a lot of Bibles now, especially study Bibles, they'll have some sort of thing at the beginning, kind of synopsis of what the book is about and who it was written to and things like that, some historical context. And so Paul was beheaded in 67 AD, as far as 67, 68 AD.
Wow.
Dates are always a little bit fuzzier back then because they were just transitioning over into the Anno Domini, year of our Lord, from BC, and so it's a little bit. And then also there was a transition from the Jewish calendar, right? And so anyway, so that's why when people say like, oh, well, it was around these times, it's because it's a little bit fuzzy.
What I find interesting about the Jewish calendar is it's also a secular calendar and lunar calendar.
Yeah.
And most all other calendars are a linear calendar. So there's a beginning and an end.
Yes.
Okay.
So anyway, but so Paul writes to Timothy from prison. Nero, the big bad Nero, who was disgusting beyond belief, was persecuting the church. Peter was also in prison. Peter was crucified upside down.
Wow.
During this time.
That's dark.
Very dark. I mean, we're talking the darkest stuff that like you think we're being persecuted just because somebody's arguing with you on Facebook or you got deleted off of Twitter. At least you're not being crucified upside down or dipped in oil and used as a torch for a garden orgy. I mean,
gross. That's
what was going on. Okay. So yeah, it's very gross. And this is the environment in which these guys were writing this. So now the other thing was that it was written to a lot of people who were of Jewish origin or Jewish belief systems that came out of that Judaism into believing that Jesus was the Messiah.
Okay.
Right? So what was going on was Paul and Peter were talking and referring to, what's ironic is that there's a lot more references to the last days in the Old Testament than there is in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so I was, growing up, I was taught that the references to the last days in the Old Testament was like in Daniel.
No, there's actually several. There's one in Jeremiah 30:24. There's Isaiah 2:2, Hosea 3:5, Micah 4:1, and then there's the famous one that Peter announces in Acts 2 in Joel, where it says, in these last days, the Spirit will be poured out on all flesh and your children will prophesy, and all of that, right?
Right.
Well, so what they were talking about was the last days in the Old Testament prophets. They were talking about the last days of the Old Covenant. Mm-hmm. And at that time, when Paul and Peter, like the Gospels were written, there was a handful of letters that were being circulated, but there was nothing like like book this of the New Testament that was just no like there was no compilation yet, right? So they were preaching from the Old Testament, and what people don't realize is that up until 70 AD, the Old Testament sacrificial system was still in place. And then 70 AD came along and the Romans wiped out Jerusalem, which we'll be talking a little bit more about in further episodes. But that was what most scholars agree, that was the end of Judaism as it was formerly known.
Right.
Under the Old Covenant.
Yeah.
And the New Covenant was ushered in. Now, the other thing that was interesting was that at the point when Paul and Peter were writing this, was that Jesus himself, who had prophesied the destruction of the temple, right? We're talking about, it's been almost 40 years since he'd said that, and it hasn't happened yet. And so
when
they were
writing, okay.
So they were pointing to it, saying like, he said that the temple was going to be destroyed. The Judaizers, the Jews that were saying like, you're a bunch of hogwash, were also saying, he said it was going to happen. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Right. And so they were using that to try to convince people that this whole Christianity thing was based off of a lie.
Right.
Right. And so there was all of this persecution that was going on. It was the first time the Romans had been persecuting. So there was a lot of people that were falling away. There were a lot of people that were second guessing what the apostles were teaching. And here it is, Paul and Peter, who die before the end of the sacrificial system, saying, don't hold on, people that hold on will overcome. So
when Paul was writing to Timothy, why was he writing Timothy? What was his goal in those writings?
Well, he was encouraging them underneath massive persecution, like disgusting, perverse persecution.
Because of the things that Nero was doing.
Because of the things that Nero was doing, and then also the Jews. So there was this kind of marriage, if you will, between Rome and Jerusalem.
Wow.
At the time, to enact persecution against and squash Christianity. And Christianity almost died on the vine during the 60s of the first century.
So this is what they were talking about. They weren't referring to the end of time.
They weren't referring to the end of time.
They were referring to the last days of that Old Covenant.
Of the Old Covenant.
And they understood that because why?
Well, because they were referring to the Old Covenant of prophets, and the prophets referred to. So, like here, it says in Jeremiah, it says, "The fierce anger of the Lord will not turn back until He has performed, and until He has accomplished the intent of His heart. In the latter days, you will understand this." Isaiah says, "Now it will come about in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills, and all of the nations will stream to it." And so when they saw, and then in Daniel, there's a prophecy in Daniel where there's a statue, and it's the four kingdoms, Babylon, Persia, Greek, and then Roman, and then the mountain, a stone that's uncut by man's hands comes and crushes the feet and then turns into a mountain that covers the whole earth. So when they're reading this stuff in Isaiah, they're going, oh, Jesus is the mountain that's supposed to cover the whole earth, the kingdom of heaven. And so when Jesus, and it also lines up with the parables of Jesus, where it's like the leaven of the lump, right? So there's, a little bit of leaven, leavens the whole lump, or the kingdom of heaven is like the seed of a mustard seed.
Right.
And it turns into the tree, right? So
if we go back to the target audience that we were starting with, right? So how is this book, how are these scriptures relevant now? Because now each generation has applied it to their generation.
Right.
You know, I wanted Alex to find a Country Boy Can Survive from Hank Williams Jr. because he's talking about, the preacher man's talking about it's the end of times.
Right.
You know, and I grew up with that song and listening to that. And so that generation felt like they were in the last days, and each generation has felt like that. And now this generation, our generation especially, grew up with that teaching, and now they're like, oh my goodness, this is for sure it, because look at these dark things, and it feels just as dark as Nero. But you're saying that God didn't.
Oh, they were thinking it was the end of the world. I mean, they were thinking it was so bad that it couldn't get any worse back then.
So who is the target audience, and what was
why
the
is it
goal?
relevant now?
Why is it relevant now?
Okay, so it's relevant now because there's reasons to hope, because it actually lines up with the good news, right? The good news is that the kingdom of heaven is supposed to be spreading across the earth, right? And when the church relinquishes her spiritual authority and doesn't pray against the destruction of God's enemies and doesn't pray for the release of his spirit across the earth, and we believe that we're supposed to check out, well, then we're the ones that were given the authority. That's what Jesus said. And so it's kind of like anybody that's honest, if you've given 2 weeks notice at your job, you kind of half-ass it, those last 2 weeks. And so a lot of Christians believe that we're on our way out of here. And so what if the world's going to hell? My place is in heaven. I'm getting sucked out of here. Too bad for those of you that are going to be left behind. Yeah. And then it just becomes more of a rescue mission at that point, where you're just trying to save souls, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think we need to be saving people. We need to be presenting the gospel of Jesus Christ to people and giving them the opportunity to give their hearts to him. Right. But then we're a part of a mission. Good news. We're a part of a mission to continue to help spread the glory across the earth. And when you look at it, and why it's relevant now, is that Jesus prophesied that it was going to happen. The prophets prophesied that it was going to happen. The old covenant has been severed. The new covenant is released, and now we're the guy. We're with the guy that's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so we're unstoppable. And it's not so that we can have dominion, so we can have authority over people. It's not about that. It's a different type of kingdom, and that's what Jesus came to reveal. So anyway, but that's probably as much as we have time for today. Yep. So hopefully you found this interesting. Hopefully you found it enlightening.
Ask questions. And then please don't forget to go to spiropillow.com and help support us there. Help support Mike. He is a wonderful man. As I've met and worked with him, and we have met and worked with him, and he's got such great products on there. I think that it's a little bit ironic that Bed Bath & Beyond is going out of business after they canceled him, because that's where you used to be able to find MyPillow products, and they had it in Costco and Kohl's and all of these things. And Mike hasn't even raised his prices during inflation.
The shipping's super reasonable.
He loves the Lord. He puts his money where his mouth is. He has invested in Christian film projects. He really wants to share the truth, and he wants to heal this nation and heal this land. So we just thank you so much for Mike, and they have some little Bible MyPillow.
We've got some ordered. We'll show you when we get them. There's like little Bible stories on kids' pillows, which is really cool. So anyway, love you guys, and thanks for watching, and we will see you next time we do this.
God bless.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The MyPillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, MyPillow 2.0. When I invented MyPillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. MyPillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature-regulating thread. MyPillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of MyPillow.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.